Welcome to another Labour Guide podcast. My name is Jan de Toit. Following the recent public protests against illegal foreigners, as well as the employment of such individuals, we've received a number of questions from concerned employers. To assist us with answers to those questions, I've knocked on the door of Henry Harper, an immigration specialist. We trust that you will enjoy this session and that Henry will be able to answer all your questions. Good morning, Henry, and thank you for joining us, and thank you for assisting us with your expert opinion on the topic of work permits in South Africa. Currently, of course, a lot of debate as to whether, amongst employers, as to whether work permits are indeed valid or not, and of course, consequences should one be found to employ a person without the required documents. So, Henry, we've put together for you to answer a number of questions that we've received from our subscribers. But before we get going, can you maybe just introduce yourself? Tell me where you're from, what you do, and how long you've been doing what you are currently doing.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Thank you, Jan, and thank you for this opportunity to have this podcast with your viewers and subscribers. My name's Henry Harper. I'm a registered immigration practitioner in Johannesburg, and I've been doing this for the past 25 years. My business, Hassle-Free Immigration, has been in that long in existence. So yes, I've seen many dispensations come and go, ministers come and go at Home Affairs, amendments made to the Act. There's many changes have been over the years, but that's what I do for a living. I'm an immigration practitioner and I assist mainly employers for work permits for South Africa if they bring people here. So that is what our main services are that we supply to our market and clients. So Jan, that's who I am. And like I say, I've been in the business for long, and I hope I can be of assistance, or even if it's just to give some information or clarity on what's going on currently in South Africa with all our immigration issues and having foreigners employed here. So yes, Jan, over to you. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Henry, and I'm sure I can keep you busy for a long time with all the questions that we receive. And of course, this session is just to answer those burning questions, relevant questions. And I'm ready to fire away with the first one. And of course, the first one, there seems to be a lot of misinformation regarding foreign nationals working in South Africa. What is the current legal position in 2026?
Well, current legal position is actually what it's always been. Our Immigration Act was the last time brought into power, or let me say properly amended it way back in 2002. So, and it's called the Immigration Act 13 of 2002. Now, since then, there's been many amendments or directives which the Department of Home Affairs brings out, to either maybe change a certain law or to have it a bit more leniently in the way that they perceive it and that they actually adjudicate it or that they use it in practice. But so to answer your question, the current situation, and I think many employers know that the focus is now on immigration and especially foreigners in South Africa and more specifically illegal foreigners in South Africa. So for the past, and that has come about in the past few months, which we all know these organizations like March to March and so on have fired up and has put a spotlight on immigration and illegal or even foreigners, legal and illegal foreigners. And that's the situation that we sit with now, So like I say, the law has always been the same. And we'll get to that, I think, shortly, what the law actually says. But there hasn't been such a spotlight on immigration as it was now, say, in the past 6 months. And that's more or less where we find ourselves now at the moment.
Well, so Henry, is it illegal for an employer to employ a foreign national, or will it only be illegal if that individual does not have the correct immigration status or work permit?
No, well, yeah, it's a bit of a loaded question, and it's actually well the right question to ask. So currently, what it says, if anyone wants to look it up, in the Immigration Act, there's Section 38, And that section specifically is around about, or goes around about the employment of foreigners. So the very first line, it says that no one can employ an illegal foreigner. So we'll get to know what is considered illegal. Then secondly, it says there that no one may employ a foreigner. Basically, if he's here on a visit visa, he cannot be employed because a visit visa doesn't allow him to be employed. And the third one under that section is if, for instance, a foreigner has got a visa, a valid visa, say for instance, the study visa, you cannot go then and employ him to be, for instance, your factory manager while he's on a study visa. His status, the visa status doesn't allow him to be employed. So those are basically the three things that the Immigration Act dictates, to employers when they are employing foreign nationals. But now, basically that is in essence what it is.
So in other words, a foreign national may well be legally employed in South Africa, and of course, certain requirements, as you've highlighted now, which we will get to and go into a bit more detail about in a minute's time.
Mm.
So Henry, what is the biggest misconceptions employers have when employing foreign nationals?
Well, I think the biggest misconception is that they first see, well, he's got a passport. And he's here in South Africa. Most people think, well, okay, he's got a valid passport. The expiry date is in 2023, 2032. So he can be here, and that's first misconception number one. Second misconception is what they do not know of is that although he has a valid passport, he's still got to have valid status in South Africa. So let's take, for instance, the most prime example are our Zimbabweans are here. There's many of them here. And Zimbabweans are what they call visa exempt. So that means they can enter South Africa, for instance, through Beitbridge border post, and then they get a 90-day visit visa stamp. Now that visit visa stamp means, well, you're here for visit, and that's it. You cannot work on that. So that's the second, I wouldn't say misconception, but that employers tend to mislook and don't look at, but then it goes further, because nowadays, the foreigners, Zimbabweans, Malawians, that's in the workforce with employers will go and say, well, I've applied for a waiver at the VFS office and now I can work. It allows me to work. And that's the third misconception. They cannot take up employment with that little waiver receipt that they get from VFS.
Okay.
So that's for starters.
So you've now alluded to Zimbabweans employed in South Africa, but before we get to the Zimbabwean exemption permits, what are the legal obligations placed on employers when employing foreign nationals?
Well, first of all, also part of that section 38, it also mentions there that an employer must make a concerted effort to see if your foreigners are legally in South Africa, first of all, and with their legal status, are they allowed to work? So it says that you must, as an employer, have to make that a concerted, like I say, concerted effort to go through all their documents. If they don't have it, well, you can't employ them.
Mm-hmm.
That is basically in essence what that is about,
So in other words, show me, don't tell me.
Correct, yes. Yeah, many employers say, well, they get foreigners coming to them and say, no, if I applied for my work permit, it's on its way, or something like that. And the employer doesn't know better and they employ the person.
Mm-hmm.
And then that is strictly what you can't do. You have to have that documents and not copies of it also, because these things, we all know it can easily be fake, but it has to be the originals, yes, that you need to see and then make copies of.
Now, Henry, the ZEPs, Zimbabwean exemption permits, they've been with us for many years, and we don't necessarily have to go into the detailed history. But what exactly is a Zimbabwean exemption permit and who qualifies for it?
Okay, so what happened with that exemption permits, it actually started way back in 2010 when we had our Soccer World Cup here. And it was then noticed, well, we suddenly need a lot of people that can help in the tourism industry and restaurants and so on. And the minister at that stage then started what was called then the DZP, a DZP permit, the Dispensations Zimbabwe permit. So that was valid for 4 years. And then they said, well, the guys are now here. We are going to make it now the Zimbabwe Special Permit, ZSP. And they've extended, well, they issued that for another 4 years. But now the trick was that you cannot get a ZSP permit if you didn't have a DZP. So that you had to have the DZP permit, then apply for your ZSP permit, which was 4 years, and then they issued the ZEP permit, which we had now, or which we have now. So, and you had to have the first two in order to get the third one. So you can't just go here in, of course, I think it was around 2016, 2017 that it was issued and it then expired. We all know that now by 31 December 2021. So, and then after 2021, those ZEP permits were extended many times, and then currently they are still valid till 28 May 2027. So that was the history of how we all got into, where the ZEP permits are now. And then ZEP permits, holders of those permits may legally work. They may be legally in South Africa. They can be employed in any position. There's no restriction on that. And that is where we currently find ourselves with the ZEPs.
So Henry, is it still required to have the first documents in place in order to qualify for a ZEP?
Yeah, correct. You cannot apply anymore for ZEP because the last time I think they were issued was in 2018, round about there. And like I say, they've all, they had expiry date of 31 December 2021. So yeah, like I say, that door is closed. You can't apply for ZEP anymore.
Okay, and those ZEP holders that are currently employed in South Africa, are they then considered to be legally employed?
Correct, yes. They are considered to be legally employed. That's correct.
Right. Now, can a ZEP holder change employers without having to apply for a new permit?
Yes, they may. They, like I say, you will see on their permits, it just says they are permitted to work in South Africa, and that can be for any employer, and they don't have to change anything on their ZEP or apply for any change on their ZEP if they change employers. They can change whenever they want or however the situation is.
Okay, and then another question that we've received, can such a permit holder lawfully be promoted or transferred to another position without affecting the validity of that permit?
Yes, he may. Like I said, there's no restriction even on that. So even if it's in the same company and he's moving from, say, the floor manager to the marketing manager, that can be done, and he doesn't have to do anything on his ZEP permit or apply for anything, any change on that.
And are employers required to retain copies of the ZEP permit and the passport? And if you can maybe just give us an idea as to what should an employer be looking for in terms of a ZEP permit? Is it a little piece of papers issued to the person, or is it something that's found in the passport? What are we looking at?
Okay, yes. First of all, yes, the employer have to have a copy of that ZEP permit. Now, that ZEP permit is a sticker in the passport. It's the size of a passport page. And it's easily identifiable. It will say on top Zimbabwe Exemption Permit, ZEP. It will have a reference number, PRP or TRV or some, where the person applied for it. And then you will see there's conditions on it. The conditions, well, first of all, there will be that expiry date, 31 December 2021. So then, even if it's expired, that is actually still the legal ZEP permit, because that one has been, like I mentioned before, extended many times. And then it will have several conditions on it. For instance, one of them would be that, a ZEP permit holder from that permit may not apply for permanent residence. And then it will say also there that ZEP permit is not renewable, but we all know the Home Affairs have renewed it. And it will then also mention ZEP may take up employment. So it will have all those conditions. And like I say, you will see it clearly. It's easily identifiable. And yes, all employers should have a copy of that and the passport photo page of their foreign employers.
Thank you, Henry. Now, as we all know, the status of the ZEP has been extended until, correct me if I'm wrong, the end of May next year. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, 28 May 2027.
Now, what will happen when the current ZEP extension eventually expires? And I think we're gonna, I think you are gonna speculate here because anything is possible. But let's look at two scenarios. It is either extended or it is not extended. What will then happen if it is not extended?
Well, you see, government and in particular Department of Home Affairs sit there in a catch-22 because, well, the estimation is that there's 178,000 ZEP permit holders in South Africa. So it's a larger number, but in terms of the total populations, it's also a small number. But we all know that all those ZEPs are legally employed. So you can imagine over the past, where we now 15 years or so, they've established themselves in South Africa. They've have homes, they've bought cars, they have families, they have children at school. So why I'm saying that is I think it's going to be difficult for Home Affairs come 28 May next year to say, listen, okay, we've now extended many times, we don't do this anymore, you got to go home, if I can just put it in short terms. And I doubt if they will do that. So there's currently, I know Home Affairs reinstated their Immigration Advisory Board, and that Immigration Advisory Board is currently looking at all the permutations that there can be or the options that there can be for ZEPs. But my feel is, or my, how can I say, opinion on this is that I think Home Affairs will give them some other form. It won't be exemption anymore, but they will say to them, and they've done this before, in the past, is you got to apply for a waiver, which we all know, and I'll get into that, and then you can apply for a general work visa so that they actually can get out of the exemption permit, if I can call it, channel, and then go into mainstream work visa channel. So I think that is what's going to happen.
But as you've now stated, approximately 120 odd thousand, if I'm not mistaken.
178,000, yeah.
78,000, possibly so many applications that will have to be dealt with by the department, and whether that's going to happen before the end of May next year, highly unlikely. So I think the long and the short, from what I understand from your response, is that unless something else is introduced, then those ZEP permits will expire at the end of May 2027, and thereafter the continued employment of such individuals will no longer be considered to be lawful. Is that correct?
Yeah, that will be worst case scenario. Yes, definitely. That can happen, but like I say, there's so many humanitarian factors there that Home Affairs can't overlook that. So it could be, that there's always that possibility.
And there's a lengthy history litigation behind the extension of the permit, so it may well happen again should nothing be introduced to answer all the questions that we have at this particular point in time. So verification of immigration documents. So what are the most common signs that an immigration document may be fraudulent?
Well, that's a tricky question, because you get different immigration documents. Like we've now covered what ZEPs, and we've covered, well, if you have a visa stamp in your passport, then there's also asylum seeker visas. Now, those ones, there's many of them that have those, and asylum seeker permit holders or visa holders may be legally employed. It says so on those forms. But what happened also is in the past year or so, Home Affairs has stopped issuing asylum visas, mainly for the fact that our neighboring countries, especially Zimbabwe, there's many Zimbabweans who have their asylum visas, or even Malawians also. I've seen many of them. But Home Affairs has stopped issuing that because they are saying, asylum is if you are persecuted in your country and you need asylum so for instance, in South Africa, you're running away from your country, you're being persecuted. Now, what Home Affairs knows is, every 3 months or so, these even asylum holders, go back to their countries to visit their families. And now Home Affairs is saying, well, if you can't keep on having asylum if you go back to your country, where you say you are being persecuted from, so Home Affairs is, and I think, well, sorry, once again, that's just my opinion and what I've seen happening. And for the last year or so, Home Affairs haven't issued asylum permits. Because there's many of them, and those are easily fraudulent. It's asylum visa is the size of an A4 page, and it will say asylum on top, and the guy's little photo on top, and then well, a lot of writing and so on. But I've seen so many fakes of that you can clearly see it's a fake. The stamp, for instance, of the Home Affairs would have a watermark in the background, stuff like that. So yes, that is the other one. It's asylum visas, that employers should be wary of.
And for those specific permits, for asylum, they, as you've indicated, they are not added to the passport, so there doesn't even have to be a passport. Is that correct? So it's just that piece of paper. Is my
Yeah,
assumption
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
You see, it could be that the person fled the country, like I said, and they left everything there, and they came here just with the clothes on their back, and they don't even have a passport. So that's what happens in most asylum cases.
Yes.
So yes, and then, so basically he has that asylum visa, but like I say, it could be easily fraudulent document also.
Now, Henry, is it possible to verify the validity of any such documents other than you telling me to phone the Department of Home Affairs? And we all know that's not going to happen. So any way that we can verify these documents?
Look, well, I said to people or employers who approach me with that same question is, for instance, let's take asylum, there is an email address on the bottom that can be emailed, and it's for asylum verifications, I think at dha.gov.za. But I know, you're not going to get a quick response there, if at all. So the other way is there's many refugee centers throughout South Africa. And what I say is, well, if you want to know that asylum seeker permit holder is valid, take him to one of those refugee offices. They can easily verify it there. Other than, like I just mentioned now, if you can clearly see it's fake, that they've copied and pasted, for instance, a stamp, a refugee office stamp. So that's the only way that I can think of, for instance, with, if it comes to asylum seeker visas. But there are, when we get to the other type of work visas, I will then also explain how to look for that. But other than that, there's no other way. You can maybe go to a Home Affairs office and do it there, but you've got to go there in person. And what Home Affairs also is saying is that the applicant must be there, or the holder of the visa must be there. They want to see that guy. And many times, well, if they see there and then that he's got a fake visa, they will arrest him and deport him there and then. So that's the risk also, for the permit holder, even if it is fake.
So Henry, just out of curiosity, your business, does it offer a service of verification, low-level verification or inspection of such documents that employers can maybe knock on your door?
Yeah, definitely. I do offer that service. And yeah, it is on a low level. I do not have any access directly to Home Affairs to say I have now verified with Home Affairs that it is so, or that the permit is legal. But, with my many years of experience and working with these permits, I can see at a glance if it is fake or not, and I will give reasons. Look at this is not there, this. So what I do is my service that I provide is in my opinion, my professional opinion, if a permit is fake or not, or valid or not.
So it's a departing point. If something seems to be suspicious, then of course further investigation will be required.
Correct, yes, correct. And most of the time, if I can just add to Jan, is that, if you suspect a visa is fake, then you can basically assume beyond all reasonable doubt that it is fake, and because the consequences is so severe if you have that person on your premises.
And then what are those consequences?
Well, you see, Home Affairs has got the powers to arrest the person who's the holder of that permit, as well as the owner of the business on whose premises he is, the owner of the premises. and it's clearly also in that Immigration Act, it stipulates it there. So you will notice on social media how many times now in the past weeks or so that inspections were done at businesses. People were there from Department of Labor, for police, Department of Home Affairs, and if Home Affairs usually finds those permits, if they are illegal or they are fraudulent, they have the powers to arrest the holder there and then, as well as the owner of the business.
Unless, of course, yeah, I think it will be dealt with on a case-to-case basis, unless, of course, the employer, the owner of the business, can prove that reasonably there was no reason to suspect that the document was a fake uh, document,
Right.
but still unnecessarily placing risk on the shoulders of the employer. And the possibility of a fine, was it 10,000 or 20,000, and recently proposed to be increased to 100,000, if I'm not mistaken?
That is correct, Jan. It can vary from any of those amounts, and there has been cases where people were fined 100,000, depending on how many foreigners, I think, and the size of it, and also if, for instance, like you've just mentioned, it's if Home Affairs can establish that the employer didn't do anything from his part to ascertain the validity of those visas. You've got to do some concerted effort, like I mentioned before, and if you can prove that, then obviously they can say, well, the employer is not an immigration expert. He did what he could, and it was an honest mistake, if I can call it that. And then probably you won't get a fine or be arrested.
And of course, I'm going to rely on the fact that I've sent the document to you, and you've given an opinion on the document. Beyond that, it's seemingly almost impossible
Yes,
without great effort to have the document verified. That should then be sufficient.
that should be, yes, correct, Jan.
Now, Henry, VFS receipts and pending applications. First of all, can you tell us what is this VFS?
Okay, so VFS is a private company. It's actually a global company. They've got many offices throughout the world. What they do is, or what their name stand for, is for Visa Facilitation Services. So they mainly assist government institutions, embassies, and so forth around the globe to collect visa applications so that Home Affairs, for instance, don't have to use one of their offices, and there's a lot of people there. VFS is a privately owned company, and actually does a great job of collecting all the visas. They do it very professionally. They're in all major city centers. And yeah, so that is what they do. They collect all applications on behalf of Home Affairs, and then from there, those applications get sent to Home Affairs for adjudication at the Home Affairs head office. Or, for instance, if it's abroad, there will be a VFS center, for instance, in Harare, and it will be sent to the SA Embassy for adjudication.
Now, I've seen some of those VFS receipts, and Henry, that begs the question. The VFS receipt clearly indicates displays the information of the applicant, and very often also reference to a ZEP permit number on that where exemption or waiver was applied for. But does the VFS payment receipt or application receipt automatically grant a foreign national the right to remain and work in South Africa?
Yes, what happens with if a person applies for, because many of them apply for waivers, and they get that the VFS receipt, you will see it looks like a little till slip you would get at a
Correct.
cafe or so. It's like a long little form till slip, and it will show a TRW waiver application. And what was happening is, up until, okay, there was a directive issued by the Department of Home Affairs that says if you had a pending waiver application or an appeal application, or your visa is still in processing, and you submitted that application before the 30th of March 2026, then your visa is deemed to be valid until next year. I think the date is June next year. So what it means, if you came into South Africa with a visa stamp and you had a 90-day visa stamp, let's say last year, December, you came in, and you then applied in January for a waiver at VFS, So that's now before March 2026 or before 30th March. Then that concession or that directive that the Home Affairs issued says that your 90-day visa is now actually valid till next year, June. So the person can remain in South Africa, but now remember, his status is that of a visitor because he's got a visit visa. And a visit visa, you may not be allowed to take up employment. So that's where the crunch or the disconnect comes in. Is many people think, yeah, but I've applied for a waiver and therefore I can work, and that's not the case.
So until such time that the application has been dealt with successfully, that person cannot be employed.
Correct. Yeah, you see, yeah, that's correct.
With the exception, of course, and correct me if I'm wrong, ZEP holders, permit holders, they are allowed to work, and they were advised previously to apply in order to continue to work beyond the deadline that was now, of course, last year extended. And we've already explored the consequences of such not being extended beyond 28 May next year. Now, can you just explain to us what is an exemption? I've heard of a waiver and an exemption. Is there a difference between the two?
Yeah, well, you see, a waiver is what most people now apply for, and what a waiver is where the applicant will say to Home Affairs, I am looking to apply for a general work visa. I need Home Affairs to waive certain requirements of the Immigration Act and regulations. For instance, in the past, it was if you are a foreigner and you've got foreign qualifications, you must show that you had your qualifications evaluated by SAQA, the South African Qualifications Authority. Now, many people don't have that, but that is a requirement. And then what happens with a waiver is you ask, or the applicant will ask Home Affairs, please waive that SAQA requirement so that I can apply for a general work visa. And here's my motivation. And part of the motivation actually then comes from the employer. You know, the applicant can't give that motivation. The employer has to give that motivation, which then form part of the waiver application. Because then Home Affairs looks at, okay, there's an employer that wants to employ this person, and here's his motivations and reasons and why he couldn't get a South African to fill the position. And I see also, well, okay, and then first of all, last is what requirements do you want to waive? You see, because Home Affairs, you need to be specific with Home Affairs if you submit any application. You can't leave anything open for interpretation there. And that's in essence what a waiver is.
And is there something such as an exemption application?
There's also, yes, there is exemptions as exemption applications. For instance, if you, that's also an application where you ask Home Affairs to exempt you from having to have a visa, for instance, you know, that, or if you were here in South Africa on asylum and you need to, you know, well, your asylum expired and you can't go back, you know, then you ask Home Affairs for exemption that they need to or give you some form of status in South Africa, legal status, and that's more or less what exemption is. But there's very little applications for exemptions. You know, exemptions usually come like, you know, for instance, the Zimbabwe exemption is where Home Affairs decides there's exemption for a group of people. So it's very rare that you would get an individual applying for exemption.
Okay. So that's something that one should look at as well. If you see exemption on the slip that is presented to you, number one, that does not allow for the person to work legally in South Africa. But number two, exemption may raise a bit of suspicion, if I understand you correctly.
Well, yes, it can. You see, what also happened is with the ZEPs, they were given the option way back in 2023 to extend well, they could either apply for waiver and then general work visa, or the other option was to extend their current visa, ZEPs at that stage. And some of them were given extension, and then they got, it was also an A4 size, but which says exemption on top, you know, the exemption permit on top. But those permits expired also, well, on the permit it expired, it was end of November 2025. But you see, and that's where it also gets tricky, because now you would think, okay, well, he's got an exemption permit, but it already expired. But now the directive that came out also covers that exemption permit to be automatically extended till 28 May next year. You see, so, and I know it's confusing, you know, but that's where I come in.
Of course.
like my name says.
You're an expert in the field, and we will definitely knock
Yeah,
on your door, Henry.
yeah.
Now, Henry, just and I think we've answered this question. Circumstances where foreign national may lawfully remain and work in South Africa while awaiting the outcome of a visa application.
Yes, so those circumstances would only be, remember always, you've got to go back to what was the initial visa status. What did the person have before he applied for his work visa?
Yes.
So, and that's also where there's a lot of, tricky parts around that because, for instance, if you come arrive in South Africa on your 90-day visit visa stamp, you may not go and apply in South Africa for instance, a general work visa. You can't change your status in South Africa from a visit visa.
Uh-huh.
You would have to go back to your country or your home country and then apply there at the SA embassy for whatever visa, work visa or long term. They call it temporary residence visa. And that's basically it. But then also you need to know if you qualify, for instance, for a general work visa, because you might be able to submit it, but if you don't have all the qualifying factors, it will definitely be refused. So yeah, that's basically in a nutshell for that issue. Yeah.
And can employers rely solely on the employee's assurance? I promise that I went to Home Affairs and they said it's okay. I can remain in the country pending the application.
No,
Nice try.
they shouldn't. No, you can't just take the word on that. Like I said, in that Section 38, it stipulates you've got to make a concerted effort and keep copies and see the original. You've got to do that.
And general work visas, what types of visas currently exist in South Africa?
Okay, so the main work visas there's three of them. The first one is an intercompany transfer work visa. Now that's mainly for your multinational corporates where they send, their management staff or technical people from their office for instance, in New York to their office in South Africa. Then the second one is the critical skills work visa. That is when there's a critical skills list that gets issued every now and again. And I think the last one was issued in October 23, 24. Where there's a certain amount or certain occupations are listed on that list of which we have a shortage of in South Africa. Now, currently, there's quite a lot of them. There's over, I don't know, like 100 or so, but it's mainly your positions like IT professionals or geologists, nurses, doctors, engineers, that sort of occupations. Also, there is some of them for technical people or artisans, tradesmen, like for instance, millwright, I know is also on the critical skills list. And if your occupation is on that list, then you are eligible to apply for a critical skills work visa. But then also there's requirements such as you must have your foreign qualifications evaluated by SAQA, and you've got to have a professional body registration. For instance, if you IT professional, you're a network engineer, which is on the critical skills list, you've got to have or be registered with IITPSA, the IT professionals body of South Africa. So, and they will then assess. What they do is that those professional bodies confirm then and give a confirmation letter of your qualifications and your work experience. And then also they give you a membership certificate. So Home Affairs then knows, okay, you are who you say you are, and you have got, because IITPSA said so. You see, and then if you have those things in place, then you can apply for critical skills work visa. But once again, you will have to, if you're on a visit visa in South Africa, you will have to return to your home country and apply for it there from the SA embassy. Right. Okay, and that was critical skills. So the third work visa is a general work visa. So in the past, for a long time, I think it was up until about 2 years ago, the requirement there was mainly you or the employer had to get a Department of Labor recommendation. So that would mean the employer had to go to the Department of Labor and then explain to them why they want this foreigner to be employed. They can't find a South African. They've tested the labor market and they couldn't find, but what happened is the Department of Labor just refused flat out all those applications because they say, with 42% unemployment, you have to find someone in South Africa. So that general work visa was rarely ever used, or the people could actually, it was never issued actually, rarely ever issued. Then it was changed when the new minister came in, and he changed it over to a point scoring system for the general work visa. But then there also, what they did is that you get certain amounts of points if you have an employment contract that stipulates your salary, your yearly income. And then also they would look at your qualifications and then your work experience. And if you, for instance, the last one I remember was also you've got to be fluent in one of the official languages in South Africa. So you've got to have then a total point of 100. And if you meet that 100 or you get that requirement of 100 points, then you can qualify for general work visa. But the big catch there was, for instance, what I've noticed is when it comes to the employment contract, the minimum salary that the person has to earn is 651,000 Rand a year, which is quite high. You see, and what happens there, it leaves a lot of people on the, your general workers out, because there's no general worker. I mean, like a factory worker or farm worker that's going to earn 650,000 Rand a year annual income. You see, so that left them out. But those are the 3 work visas that you can get. There are other ones also, for instance, a corporate visa. You might know of that or heard of that. But that is mainly for, if it's a large construction company that needs 100 people to be in certain positions because they going to upgrade the Gautrain, for instance. It must be also national interest type of thing. Then a corporate visa can be applied for. And then there's also the other one that I've seen is also for, and some of your readers or your subscribers might see this, is it's a little green sticker in a passport that says temporary residence visa, and that's also for seasonal workers. So what happens is those applicants or the foreigners that come in can apply at the border if they have a letter, for instance, from a farm. And they need, seasonal workers to pick the fruits or whatever, work on the farm for a certain period. And that's also a valid visa. It's usually issued for a year, and it will be for a certain company. It's usually it was usually meant to be for farmers and also the mining industry. So those are the visas that's available currently.
And Henry, your general work visa, your critical skills work visa, am I correct in saying that there must be a support of a prospective employer in order to qualify for such?
Correct. So, Jan, I forgot one. There's another work visa. It's actually a spousal visa with condition to work. That is if the foreigner is married to a South African or a permanent resident holder, or in a life partnership with a South African citizen or permanent resident holder. Then there's also another visa for spousal visa with condition to work. So, sorry, I just meant to add that one also, yeah.
Okay, great. And these permits, the actual visa, what does it look like? Is it an A4 page? Is it something that's in the passport? How do we know that we're looking at the real McCoy?
Well, yeah, it will be in the passport, and it will be a sticker which is the size of a passport page. But now there the cruncher comes in, because there was many of these visa stickers, they get stolen at the Home Affairs depots or wherever they keep them. And then, you get rogue agents that actually have these visas, and they charge a lot, a couple of thousand, I've heard like 5,000 Rand. And then they just print your name things on that visa sticker. And then, you would think, yeah, okay, well, I've got a general work visa, and the employer will not know better either, because it's the actual sticker from Home Affairs, but someone else just filled in or typed in the details on there. So, then you get that, and there's thousands out there. But now, yeah, and the second, well, to answer your question in the second instance also is, you will see easily if that visa is fake. Usually what happens is, but for a real genuine visa will show under the conditions, it will have the employer's name and also the occupation of the visa holder. So it will be for XYZ company as marketing manager, for instance. And also the employer would have been in a part of the process, like I mentioned before, when the foreigner applied for that visa.
Well, here we are working, Henry. We could have retired already if we just managed to get our hands on some of those stickers. Henry, so I think the next question, and it's rather a statement from my side or confirmation, is if company A assisted the individual in obtaining that specific permit or visa, then you can't go and work for another employer without going through a formal process of having that changed. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So if you had your valid visa working for XYZ company and it is stated on the condition of the visa and you change to another company, then you need to do what is called a change of condition application. It's basically an application again for a new work visa because you're saying to Home Affairs, I've left XYZ company and I'm now at ABC company, and this is the reasons. And can we, but it is a process that needs to be done, and it's also done. You can do that at VFS. So you don't have to exit the country and do it again if you had to do like initially do it in your home country. It can be done in South Africa via VFS.
And then the next question, and then you referred earlier on to let's call the person the marketing manager. If the visa clearly states marketing manager at company A, can the position of that person within company A be changed, or must it remain that of a marketing manager?
No, it can also. So, it's either if you change the employer or if you change your position in the country, in your company, then you have to make that application again to Home Affairs to say, I'm now marketing manager, I've been promoted to a financial manager. And then you have to do that application again to change your occupation on the visa, or your position rather on the visa.
And Henry, how often should employers verify these documents? I don't think that it's something that you're going to have to do every 2 or 3 months, but do you have a time frame that you can suggest to employers in terms of the verification of these documents?
I would suggest, yes, at least once a year, check that out, and have it verified or see what the position is. And then also, you will know if, for instance, you have a foreigner that's got a legal visa and the visa expires 28 October, 2026, to just make a note of it in the beginning of that. Or no, the actual rule is, if you are going to submit an application in South Africa, you have to do that 60 days prior to the expiry of your current visa. So then you must know, okay, well, I need to start work on this 90 days before the time so that you give yourself a month. And then if the application can be submitted in South Africa, it must be done 60 days prior to the expiry of the current visa. So yeah, if employers can just, have that somehow, a system for that or a diarized system for that, and then you will know. Because if the problem is if you leave it for too long and you leave it and there's like 1 week left on the visa, then it's going to be problems. You're probably going to get a rejection because you didn't submit 60 days prior to the expiry date.
So Microsoft Excel and AI is your friend.
Definitely use those, yeah.
Then the last question that we will discuss today, and we looked at the consequences for the employer where a person is illegally employed in South Africa, and liability and consequences for the owner of the business. A question that I very often receive is whether you can dismiss a person that does not have the correct documents to be lawfully employed. And the answer is yes, you may do so. However, and this was dealt with by the courts in the past on 2 or 3 occasions already, where such individuals were dismissed without following a fair procedure prior to termination of employment. And it was argued that the individual does not have a valid work permit and therefore does not qualify to be seen as an employee in terms of the Labor Relations Act. However, the outcome of that was that in terms of the Constitution, all employees are protected and all employees are entitled to be treated fairly. And the answer there is you're going to have to go the route of incapacity. It will be an incapacity dismissal, unless, of course, an employee presents a fraudulently obtained document. Then that is misrepresentation. It's an act of dishonesty, and you're going to deal with it as misconduct. But where there is no valid permit, it is expired, or whatever the case may be, you're going to have to deal with that person in terms of incapacity. And incapacity can take on many different forms, and it's been confirmed last year in terms of the amendments made to Schedule 8, the Code of Good Practice on dismissals. But from your side, anything else that an employer should consider in terms of the termination of employment? My question is, must you give the employee a reasonable opportunity to obtain the correct documents, and what will happen in the interim then? Can you still employ that person?
Yeah, Jan, I think you touched on it. There is labor the guidance of this or the regulation on it that if you find that the person doesn't have the visa, you must give him a chance at least, to do that. But now that's where the crux comes in, because he most likely didn't qualify for a work visa to start with, So to give him chance to do that, or to say, listen, I'm putting you on 3 months paid leave, go sort out your visa. It's sort of a frivolous exercise, maybe like we know the labor law might dictate that you got to give him some chance to do that. And after 3 months, if he returns without a visa or with another fake visa, then it's grounds for dismissal. But yeah, I would say, do it like, go follow the regulations of labor, guidance on that. Not to get in trouble with labor then, because like you mentioned, that even if a foreigner is illegal in South Africa, in terms of Basic Employment Act, I think he still has got some rights, and that has to be adhered to or need to be taken into account when you find a foreigner with that you need to let go and get him and ask him to do get his visa. So yeah, but like I said, it's a catch-22 situation, in that instance.
And the question also is whether it would be fair to expect the employer to wait 3 months, 4 months, 5 months for the employee to return with the correct documents. Operationally, it will have an impact. But on a more technical note, even if you place that person on unpaid leave, that person is still considered to be an employee. So you will still be employing an illegal person, if I can put it that way. So the best advice here is to, as you've stated earlier, is to open up an Excel spreadsheet or a diary and keep track of documents, validity periods, and then deal with that well in advance in order to avoid having to terminate employment the day that you discover the document is no longer valid.
No, that is correct, Jan. Now, absolutely, you've nailed it on the head there. That's what needs to be done. It's what I've seen, and I've over the past few years actually worked with many small to medium-sized companies, and it's especially those ones, they have like less than 50 employees, and they might have 20 or 10 or 15 foreigners, and the foreigners actually work so well, so employees tend to. Look, I need a guy. He has to work for me. He does so well. He knows my machines. He knows my processes. But the law is still there, and employers just need to take notice of that first and foremost. That's my advice.
That's true, Henry. And what we've seen recently developing is where employers that previously employed foreign workers without the correct documents are now refusing to employ South Africans, are now opting to close shop, which, of course, that's a discussion for another day. But Henry, thank you so much for your time. And if an employer would like to reach out to you for assistance, your website is on the screen, your web address is on the screen. Will they find your contact details there, and can they schedule an appointment through your website?
Absolutely. Jan, yeah, everything is on the website. There's also guidance there. I've also put a link on there, how to spot a fake visa, for instance, and also a link there to see if you qualify. It will give all the work visas that we've talked about now. And then, yeah, my contact details is there. I do all my meetings via Zoom or Teams meetings. I just find that's much more, productive.
Yeah.
So, yes, but everything is there on this website of mine. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time today, Henry. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Jan, and all the best there. And I hope we speak again soon.
Thank you. Thank you.